Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, the Too Opinionated podcast could really use your help. And it's easy, it's free. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, imdb.com, named us a top 100 podcast. We came in at number 82. That's a big deal because there's 15 million podcasts and growing. So to be named to anybody's top 100 list, pretty big deal for us. And the way you can help is to go to imdb.com, look up the Too Opinionated podcast, and that's it. Just bringing our page up. That traffic really helps us out. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's also free, but that really helps us to attract these amazing guests that we keep bringing on the program. And that's it. Two easy ways for you to support us, and we would really appreciate the help. Now let's get to that interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. I'm so excited today. I've got author Mark Harris with me. So welcome, Mark.
Happy to be here.
And I read you're also a pilot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. So let's start kind of that way. Give me a little bit of your background, what you did growing up and, how you became a pilot. Because I know that you were in the Air Force and now you're doing some more on the corporate side, but just talk a little bit about that and give us some background.
Sure. I grew up in a small mountain town in northeast Georgia.
Yep.
We were fairly poor. My dad was an upholsterer, and I always wanted to fly. I was always trying to build hang gliders or jump off the top of his van with a trash bag or
Well, at least it wasn't the
roof. Anyway, went to college, got a degree in physics, and thought I'm going to go to graduate school and all that, but still had the itch and just applied for the Air Force while I was in college and got accepted for a pilot slot. So the rest is history. I did that, flew C-130s, flew cargo around in a little single pilot plane for a year, then airline for about 12 years.
Well, yeah, you've done a little bit about everything.
A little bit. No drug running, but the cargo job I had was kind of similar. If you got to see the pants stuff, but
what's your kind of your thoughts on the air traffic we're having now? We had that terrible accident there a week ago. Is it just bad luck? Is that lack of personnel? Is it just a one-time occurrence and maybe it happens again several years from now or something? But
I mean, in my job, I could get in quite a bit of trouble by speculating too much. So
yeah, that's right.
So
yeah, don't get yourself in trouble.
I think both political parties have tried to make hay of it,
well, that was kind of my point. Is there actually a problem, or was it just an accident that
the one the one in Washington D.C. certainly looks like it was just an accident. I'll certainly wait for the conclusions, but one of the aircraft was off his altitude. We know that. So
right.
So we'll see. And I think it probably was just a tragic accident.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame that we're in that kind of situation now where it's everything gets kind of politicized by one party or both parties, but we're kind of, the rest of us are kind of stuck in the middle of that. But that was kind of my thought, just from a layman, and just kind of observing, reading stuff. It seemed like just an accident to me. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think, if an air traffic controller went home earlier, like they reported, that had anything to do with what happened there.
Yeah.
The accident a day or two ago with the Delta aircraft, again, I've seen the video and I have my opinion, which I'll keep to myself, but without knowing,
Yeah, it's tough.
I mean, it looks like, it could have been weather. Could have been mechanical, it could have been powder. So out of the three, again, I have my opinion, but I'm not going to point fingers. I'll let them do their investigation.
Well, I
But
always go back to flying always safer than driving.
I'm sure.
But when something happens, obviously it's a much bigger tragedy.
Right. But given what we all saw in the video happen with that airplane, aircraft control had nothing to do with that.
That's right. Yeah. That was kind of my thinking, but I figured you knew more about it than I did, so I just asked. Well, that's it. Well, so we've got a book that you've written. It's called Houses of the Holy, and it's the writing on it is really strong. And did you always know that you could write, or is that something that you kind of discovered when you sat down and said, I think I got a story to tell?
Both. My writing skills improved along the way. Now, I did give them credit in the book. We did have a couple of ghostwriters working with me.
Sure.
I ended up writing some of the last chapters myself. There's a lot of back and forth, but yeah. So
give me a little insight on that. So when you have a ghost writer, is that like, are you working hand in hand to write the whole story, or is it more when you hit a rough spot or you're having a little trouble with something, then they step in and help out? How does that work?
Well, I think traditionally, the ghost writers sits down with the author and they spend many, many hours doing interviews.
Yeah.
And recording the interviews and everything. I have been working on this for 15 years.
Right. What kind of a passion project?
I had this, probably 500-page document, starting, going day by day, sometimes hour by hour of and all sorts of background information, everything in there.
Yeah.
So I dumped that in his lap, and that's where they started. And then, of course, and I've got nothing but great things to say about the guys that worked on it. Having said that, having someone else tell your story is challenging because
right.
You get back in and read it and say, well, that's not quite right, and no, that's not really what I was thinking. And so, it becomes personal. So there was a lot of reviewing and editing and going back and changing and fixing.
Well, that's why it takes so long.
Yeah.
To make a book. People think you just sit down and write it, you're done. No. You probably got to rewrite it several times.
I don't know if you had a chance to glance over the book very much, but if you had a chance to look at chapter 15, with these tangled webs of people. So I had discovered a lot of that, but we had the ghostwriter that finished up the project after the tragic death of the first one.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
that's terrible. So that's why you had a couple.
Yeah. Well, actually, the first one I hired didn't do any work. She said her brakes went out. And she was in a bad accident, and she took my money and ran. I never heard from her again. But anyway,
yeah, I think maybe you'd have been better off just writing it.
But anyway, the last guy, he did some really good investigative research and took what I had dug up over the years myself and expanded on that. He had access to some more records that I have, court transcripts and records and stuff. And he really did some good work there that really, helped.
Let's get into a little bit about what the book's about. When you originally started putting things together at that time, 15 years ago, was the intention to write a book, or was it more just
it was survival,
like an investigative type of thing?
It was survival.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. So, Houses of the Holy. What is it about? What kind of drove you to write that?
Well, what drove me to write it really, it was all about protecting my kids.
Okay. Yeah.
And then nobody would protect my kids, and cases were fixed, and there's this enormous influence being exerted for this one nobody on paper. And I couldn't figure out why. So I started looking for answers and poked at a lot of hornet's nest and got a lot of stings along the way. I mean,
I was gonna say, I'm sure not everybody was excited to talk to you.
Oh no, I mean I'm a very well hated person right now. Pretty much the whole law enforcement establishment in Florida, the whole religious right, and a few other groups. So probably the mob. I don't know how much of the mob is left, but
and the there's a few right out there, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, so houses of the holy. You wanted to protect your children, but what does that mean? What exactly was going on?
Don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but got married quickly, disastrous marriage. She had a little boy, toddler, who had no other father. She got pregnant long after we were married, that found out years later that was from an affair, but I still accepted him as my own son, and both of them was my own son.
Yeah.
And, but she spiraled out of control, one affair after another, and all this distorted thinking and so forth, and suicidal thoughts, and I kept trying to get her help, and she would reject it. And anyway, so we finally separated, and she moved back in with her parents, and then my kids were sexually abused repeatedly by her siblings, her younger siblings, who were adolescents at the time. My kids were 4 and 6. And it was about that time I saw child pornography on the guy's computer and started putting the pieces together. We had been actually fairly close, and I've been like, people have been trying to tell me that my then wife, my ex-wife's problems were from abuse from her father. And I was like, no, we refused to believe it. And then, they reached a point where I couldn't deny it anymore. Glaring signs of abuse in all his kids. I mean, horrific signs. And now his kids were sexually abusing my kids. So I go.
It was just a pattern.
Yeah.
Coming out of this family.
So I go to make a report to I go talk to the Child Advocacy Center.
Yeah.
It turns out the members of the board of trustees there are connected to him. And the case advocate for child abuse cases warns me not to make any report. Says he'll retaliate. And I'm thinking, it's like, well, isn't that your job to make sure he doesn't?
I know that's terrible advice. Yeah. So you're just supposed to ignore it,
right? So I didn't at first, and then there reached a point where I had to, and then he told me to wait 2 weeks. He told me to delay. In the middle of this, I told him about what I'd seen on the guy's computer. Well, I get permission to go back to his house. Take a disk drive with me. I'm going to copy it all and turn them in. Well, the computer's been swapped out. He's tipped off.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it went from day one. So anyway, I ended up making a report directly to law enforcement. Well, I took the kids to a therapist. I want to be real careful. The therapist says you got to report it. They were sexually abused.
Yeah.
Either you report it or I do, but somebody's got to report it. So I reported. No investigation, got shut down right away. So the so-called child protection investigator who came out told me, well, this was in one county and they lived in another county. He said, well, you need to go make a report directly to law enforcement in the county where it occurred. So I did. So the report gets forwarded to Niceville police officer Joey Forgione. Now Forgione was rewind a little bit when I talked to the case advocate, Tom Dunn. He says, don't tell anybody about this but me and Joey Forgione. So it gets forwarded to Joey Forgione. It gets buried, no investigation. Disappears to a black hole. Yep. So the kids get sexually abused again. Meanwhile, the school, the kids that are going to the small Christian school, the school principal makes a report, nobody responds. The kid's therapist makes another report, and nobody responds. They both said they never seen anything like this. And this.
Well, I'm assuming at this time you're also trying to probably get them away from that situation too.
Right. And the problem was I could not force my estranged wife to not bring the kids to her parents' house where she lived. I had no legal, nothing in the court system allowing me to do that.
Well, yeah, you'd have to prove it first.
Right.
to
So
get
what I
somebody
did,
to
I went
act
and
it.
filed a restraining order. So I filed a restraining order against the two little girls and their father. Um, and he proceeded to blatantly violate it and with no repercussions. Um, so he threatens to Baker Act me, have me involuntarily committed for psychological observation because I'm crazy for thinking he would molest kids. Um, so then they kidnap the kids. He threatens to kidnap the kids. I find out about it too late. 2 days later, he kidnaps the kids. Um, now,
Did he like leave the area, or was he holding them
well,
there?
the whole family was involved. My ex-wife drove the getaway car, but he was on the phone continuously with her uh, when as they were taken from their school. Um, and there was a witness that he had that testified that he had approached her just days prior, saying that he was going to take the kids and I was going to never see him again if I didn't drop the restraining order. So as soon as the kids are taken, uh, I'm suddenly get hit up with these extortion demands from. So he's a big church leader, or
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
Okay, extortion demands from the leaders of this church, and I recorded some of the phone calls. Explicit demands. If I want to see my kids, I have to drop the restraining order, drop the allegations of abuse. His pastor calls me up and says, Mark, you're warped, twisted, and unstable. God's against you. If you don't keep this in the church. And he says, if you don't stop this, I'm going to rebuke and disfellowship you. He's going to punish me, publicly humiliate me if I don't drop the restraining order. And he's the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department's chaplain.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. So I refused to comply with their demands. They said that there was a deadline. I passed the deadline. And so my ex-wife father was instructed by a child protection investigator to file a restraining order against me.
Well, I'm guessing she's telling her version
Well,
to
she was a
them.
pawn. She was a pawn. She didn't want anything to do with it. She was happy
Yeah.
with the kids being with me. And she, in fact, the night before she took the kids, she was at a mutual friend's house crying, saying her father was trying to make her take the kids and she didn't want to do it. So she was being threatened and used. Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, so she files a restraining order against me following the instructions of a child protection investigator out of the same child advocacy center in Niceville, Florida. But the person who gave the order to do that was a woman named Donna Parrish, Florida Department of Children and Families supervisor, who, guess what? I find out, years later, she was a registered officer of the Boggy Bayou Church of Christ. Well, Mike Nobles is a Church of Christ leader.
Yep.
So it just kept on going like that.
I mean,
So,
it's very to me that almost sounds kind of cultish.
yeah, well, it gets far more cultish.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was like, I desperately needed a lawyer now. I was representing myself with a restraining order, so I raised every penny I could. While rewind a little bit, after I filed the restraining order, I switched churches. We were going to this Pentecostal church, Calvary Chapel in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Suddenly, this guy shows up there out of the blue, befriends me, takes me out to lunch, takes my kids out to lunch. This is before they were kidnapped. Has an unusual interest in the case, offers to be a guardian ad litem for the kids. And I found out years later, this guy is George W. Bush's former attorney.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his name is Ed Fleming.
Okay.
So
No,
he's
I've heard of Ed Fleming. Yeah.
Oh, have you? Okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he represented Bush in Bush v. Gore. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, so he sets me up. I go to him looking for a lawyer. He sets me up with a lawyer who ends up making all sorts of dirty deals behind my back and hides evidence from me. It was a big hairy mess.
I mean, this sounds like something you would watch in a movie or on a TV show. It doesn't sound real.
It gets much worse.
Yeah, I know it does. I know it does. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So okay. So now we have all this stuff going on in the court system. Uh, uh, So I start poking around trying to figure out what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
The school principal, she's been very concerned about all this. She runs a background check on my ex-father-in-law, gives me a copy of it. So I start going through there looking for anything. Found some business associates and names and stuff. And then there was this address. It was a complete total shot in the dark, but there was a property address in Walton County, another county,
Yeah.
adjacent county, that had his name associated with it. That I was like, I've never known him to have any property in Walton County ever or lived there. So
Yep.
let's go check it out. I got nothing else to do. I'm at a dead end everywhere else I've turned here. So I drive out there, and the house is empty. It turns out the house was his former business partner's house.
Yeah.
Um, and this guy comes storming out. I knock on the door of the neighbor to try to see if they can tell me anything about this house. I didn't know the neighbor owned the house now. But he starts threatening to call the police and raising hell. He's this old icon of the Vietnam War military
Yeah.
industrial complex guy, turned government contractor,
Right.
and he keeps screaming, "There's nothing in the house, you can't see the house." And it's like, I didn't ask to see the house. I just wanted to know who owned it. What's the history here? So anyway, some other neighbors saw this going on, and they approached me and invited me over to their house, and they, told me about some strange things that have been happening in that neighborhood. Like that house had two suspicious fires that were so big that the fire department had to respond, where something was being burned, outside.
Right.
Um, but the worst thing they told me about was a house just a few houses away, where they said that the Walton County Sheriff's Department frequented the house on friendly visits, and there was this French guy living there with his wife, who they said was a Panama City stripper, and they were foster parents.
Okay.
And the foster kids were very withdrawn, and they had concerns about them being abused. Well, uh, according to this neighbor, and I went and talked to another neighbor, they all have the same story. This family disappeared in the middle of the night, leaving lots of their personal belongings behind. They've been throwing around money. The guy was buying sports cars and stuff. Uh, I just recently found out, dug this up the other day. He was listed as a self-employed investments, and this is a record of his contributions to the Republican National Committee. He's a
Yeah.
French national. So anyway, uh, supposedly they found all this camera equipment, computers, child pornography in the house, and it was all made to go away. And the foster kids are gone. Who knows what happened to them?
Awful.
I've tracked this Frenchman down. He's back in France now, and he was a Frenchman. I found his marriage certificate. He was born in France. Last record I could find, he's in Marseille, France.
Yeah.
And so who was this character? What were they doing? So then I started following the money trail. Okay. Turns out this guy was involved in these corporations. Well, one of his business partners was the pastor of the Funiac Springs, Florida, in Walton County Church of Christ.
Yep.
Uh, and one of his other partners was a big shot of the Pentagon. He was the head of weapons procurement for weapons research at the Pentagon through like 3 presidents.
I mean, these are some pretty high up people you're
Yeah.
dealing with here.
Well, years later, after the guy died, I found this Pentagon guy's obituary, and a lot of things that happened in between then to tweak my interest, and this got my attention.
Yeah.
Was his son was quoting from Aleister Crowley's The Equinox in the guy's obituary, in this Pentagon official's obituary.
All right.
Another one of the guy's addresses, the Frenchman, was property that was owned by the Grand Master of the Herman Lodge in Florida.
Keeps getting bigger.
Well, yeah. So anyway, my 3 months go by, and this judge. So all the cases get there's a case against me. There's a case that I filed against them. They get combined and all transferred twice and end up in the hands of this one judge, whose wife worked for a prominent Freemason congressman.
Okay.
And that happened over and over again with the same judge. And the guy flagrantly violated the restraining order. The judge buried it. I filed motions to hold him, in contempt for the violation of the restraining order. They wouldn't even record them. They sat on him for 2 months before they recorded him. They didn't get a hearing until a year later.
What in the world?
I
They're
reported
just covering it up.
I reported the violations to law enforcement. The report says that an arrest warrant would be requested, but no arrest warrant was ever issued. That got buried. I tried to report the kidnapping. They wouldn't take a report, wouldn't investigate. So the judge dismisses the case that I filed against them, saying I don't have standing to protect my own kids.
Which that obviously is just wrong.
Yeah. One of them said because he didn't live with him anymore because he'd been kidnapped. And the other one said it was because I wasn't his biological father, which didn't matter. I was still his legal father.
Right.
So, and that judge just kept doing the same kind of stuff. Anyway, right before the final hearing of the case against me, my attorney gets cold feet and quits. Leaves me high and dry. So I swam.
Well, I mean, was that just coincidental or was he getting pressure?
She was getting pressure.
Yeah, or she, yeah.
Yeah. And I think she was worried about getting her hands dirty too, because I found out later what was going on behind the scenes. So anyway, I scrambled to learn how to play lawyer, subpoena witnesses and everything. And, I got the kid's therapist in there to testify, the school principal to testify, and they had nothing. They had nothing against me. My wife had said I was stalking her. The evidence that I was stalking her was her father said I was stalking.
Right.
They said that I was erratic and unstable. The evidence that I was erratic and unstable was that I believe my kids were sexually abused. So that was it. That's what they had. So
they had nothing.
Yeah. So the judge had to dismiss the case against me. Well, they took off out of the courtroom, hopped in their car, ran across the do not walk on grass signs, sped away. The kid's therapist and school principal, who were friends with each other, followed them for a bit because they were concerned what was going on.
Yeah.
And my ex-father-in-law was looking over his shoulder, speeding, obviously panicked. They rushed to where they put one of my kids in school, the other one they kept out of school, snatched him again, and hit him again for another week. So, anyway,
I mean, just as I'm a parent, grandparent. I can imagine just the emotional turmoil you were going through.
I lost 30 pounds in 3 months. So.
I believe that. Yeah, I mean that's so stressful. And you're just trying to protect your kids.
And everybody knew it, and they knew it. So I get the kids back, and
How did you end up getting them back after they hit them for another week?
Suddenly, my then estranged wife, now ex-wife, calls me up, says we need to talk. Shows up at my house, drops the kids off, acts like nothing ever happened. And,
why do you think that was?
Well, I think they were in a bind. They knew I wasn't going to go away, and they could, and I was going to go back to court if they kept hiding the kids from me again. And they were getting too much attention, so they thought they'd play nice, and I would just go away if they played nice.
Yeah,
that was the strategy. But the kids were traumatized. That was the problem, and the kids started talking right away, and that was the problem. Gabe started telling me about his grandfather's gun room. That's what he called it, the gun room. The guy had an arsenal of weapons. He had explosives, grenades, rocket launchers, and but then he started. Gabe's autistic and artistic. He has very high functioning. But anyway, his gift is that he has photographic memory. He's very artistic. And so we started drawing this stuff for him. And he drew all these guns, very detailed, accurate pictures of guns, but he started drawing other stuff, like swords with symbols on them, and pyramids and statues of Anubis, and this altar with bones burning on it, and this small town biker preacher told me years later, and he looked at it and didn't hesitate. He says, that's Knight Templar stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I grew up. My mother's dad was a military guy and self-made man, that type of thing. But he always talked about secret societies, and
yeah.
that there's a lot more going on than most of us realize. And
Well,
that when you started describing it, I was like, I've heard him talk about stuff like that. So that doesn't surprise me.
well, it did me,
Like
because I was very naive about that kind of
yeah.
stuff, very skeptical, um, but putting some of the pieces together. So, I found out that this house was built by a military veteran, Freemason Knight Templar leader.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the first house, the best I can tell, going through all the property records, the first house built in the neighborhood at what appears to be at or close to the highest point in the city. Not a very spectacular looking house, a plain little house, but the numbering on the streets didn't even make sense. The house was numbered 1118, which is the year the Knights Templar were founded. So my ex-father-in-law took out the permit to build this house while he was active in this white supremacist neo-Confederate group in northern Alabama. He was a leader in it. They were tied to the Ku Klux Klan and the Posse Comitatus and all these overlapping groups. The group he was in was called the Patriot Network.
Right.
But while he took out the permit, but he didn't own the property. The property was owned by this guy named Charles Walter Ruckle II, a billionaire, John Birch Society crazy, who was on the executive council of the John Birch Society with people like Nelson Bunker Hunt. I don't know if you know those names. We're going back to the 60s here. And after he's arrested, he gets drawn into these businesses, becomes a full business partner with all these other Church of Christ leaders while he's awaiting trial. And with under the guise of Subway restaurants, but behind it are all these contractors and builders making money hand over fist, laundering drug money and developments down in Miami and so forth. But the corporation names were interesting. Alchemy, androgynous, androgyny, androgen, androkin, androcam, tabula rasa, augury, luminous, panoply, a knight's helmet. I had to Google some of those words like augury. Well, that's when the priest in the temple that housed the Ark of the Covenant, would go through the intestines and see the future through augury, and panoply, that's a knight's helmet. Androgynous is the androgynous god, Baphomet. Baphomet is the androgen. That was the name of one of the corporations.
Yeah.
Church of Christ leaders naming corporations after Baphomet. And one of these guys was a big shot at Lipscomb University. He died. He's one of many people in the story to die suspicious deaths. He allegedly died fly fishing. He supposedly slipped and fell and was pinned to a tree and drowned. But
oh my gosh,
that's what really happened. But he's memorialized at Lipscomb University in a fountain, by a fountain shaped like a pyramid. So, given that, I've had this parade of, right-wing extremists, Christian fundamentalists, Freemasons targeting me and my kids, for years.
I mean, how did like I would have been legit concerned for my well-being if I was in that position.
Well, I was, because it wasn't just them. Then I found out the mob ties, and there were lots of them. This cop that kept fixing cases for him was the son of a mob hitman who was a known associate of Santo Trafficante Jr.
Oh, geez.
This Church of Christ leader / lawyer in South Florida that was setting up all these corporations, and they're all related to each other, intermarried and church-wise and everything else, businesses. He had mob ties, tied to a guy named Alberto, the great corrupter San Pedro, who was a murderer. But San Pedro had a guy working for him that I'll think of his name here in a minute. But anyway, Ricky Prado. There's some books written about him. Ricky Prado was a was a hitman for the cocaine trafficker, and he ended up going to work for the CIA, and then became a big shot in Blackwater. You know, and the tango went just
it's
keeps
so
on going.
complicated.
Well, it is, and I think some of this stuff overlaps. Some of it's directly related, some of it's indirectly related, some of it just overlaps with each other, and it's hard to know how much is directly
Right.
related or not. But again, the Church of Christ guy who was Nobles, my ex-father-in-law's business partner's brother-in-law, who was setting up all these corporations, he had business partners that one was an advisor to Bill Clinton, one was an advisor to Barack Obama, and that same guy was also a business partner to Donald Trump. So, I mean, this guy had a direct line to the White House, to multiple presidents. And they were
in both parties.
Yeah, in both parties. And they were making lots of money off of it too. They were getting HUD contracts and so forth. You know, they all had their money, their hand in the cookie jar. So anyway, so that's one aspect of the story.
Wow.
So it turns out when I filed a restraining order, he surrendered 4 rifles and 643 rounds of ammo to the sheriff's department. Well, the sheriff's department gave him back to him, and he's a felon. And the paper trail shows that the local FBI office, the Florida Department of Children and Families, the Niceville Police Department, the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department, the judge in the case, my lawyer, his lawyer, all of them knew that they were arming a felon, and they all hid it from me, and they all lied about it later to cover their tracks. But I got the paper trail that shows that. So,
I mean, could you not take that to someone higher to go after some of those people? That just doesn't seem right.
Well, it went as high as Eric Holder himself obstructing justice.
Yeah, that's pretty high up.
Before it was over. So after, well, I hate to just mention this casually, but then the kids dropped a bombshell. They said that they'd seen their grandfather murder a man. So now I'm in a dilemma. They tried to put me in prison for reporting the sexual abuse. They tried to put me in prison for reporting the firearms.
Right.
We used to investigate both. And now they said they seen a murder. Now what am I going to do? And I wrestled with it for a long time. And
poor kids.
Yeah. Well, so I finally decided to report it. And I emailed the Niceville Police Department. They said, come in next week and make a report. Well, between the email and next week, Mike Nobles, my ex-father-in-law, and his immediate family were in hiding in South America, in Guyana. So anyway, so
what's the current standing?
Well, the current standing is he's in Harrison, Arkansas, where I found no family ties, any history whatsoever. The only connection I can find in Harrison, Arkansas is it's the home of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yep. Well, and that's probably all it is. He's well, so is that remove him from your orbit? Are you
it does.
Are the kids with you now full time?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, at least that part has been resolved positively.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. I question myself sometimes about whether I should have written the book or not written the book, but it ate at me for years. It's it's the injustice to my kids. It's those foster kids in Walton County that disappeared in the middle of the night. My ex-father-in-law was a foster parent. They've erased those records. The state has denied twice in writing that he was ever a foster parent, and God only knows what happened to them.
I mean, if that stuff's getting covered up, it has to be coming from really high up. Somebody has to be pretty high up to cover that stuff up. That's terrifying.
Well, things got really interesting when, after all the failed efforts to label me crazy and frame me and wrestle my kids away from me through various means, not just by him, but by state officials and local officials in Florida, they went after my career. So he's holed up in South America. He emails my employer saying I come to work drunk, I'm crazy, claims I had a less than honorable discharge in the military and all this nonsense. And
I
so
mean,
my
that would seem like it'd be pretty easy to check.
yeah, well, exactly the company. I was involuntarily discharged by a military board of inquiry. That's another whole separate story. But the
Sure.
company knew that. They had my DDs 214, and it was not less than honorable, by the way. So,
Yeah.
But anyhow, they this HR representative, HR manager, forces and the chief pilot forced me to go get a substance abuse evaluation with a company doctor. Now, I hadn't even drank in 2 years at this point. I decided to take a break just for personal reasons, not because I
Yeah.
thought I had a problem. I was a single parent, going through all this crap alone, raising
Right.
kids alone.
Yeah, I could totally
So,
that would make you want to drink, but I could
yeah,
totally see
yeah,
why you
exactly.
would not want to.
Right. So anyway, so I go and I pass with flying colors. Okay. And they claim this guy is the company doctor, but he's not the company doctor. The guy was an officer of the Roswell Masonic Lodge, another military veteran. He had John Birch Society literature all over his office. And so,
I'm surprised they didn't try to fudge the results.
they did. So I passed. I passed. Well, they didn't fudge those results, so I passed. So then the doctor demanded that I go get a psychological evaluation because this guy says I'm crazy. The crazy guy says I'm crazy, so I have to go get a psychological evaluation.
I mean, so anybody can just walk up and say you're a crazy, and they're just going to take that serious.
Well, that's the thing, and they completely broke the law with the substance abuse evaluation because it has to be either you know pre-employment, post-accident, or reasonable suspicion, or random, and it was none of those because some crazy federal convict holed up in South America making an accusation is not reasonable suspicion.
That's
They have
right.
to actually observe you appearing to be drunk on the
Well, that's
job.
right. There's got to be some
So,
proof, some evidence.
so anyway, but again, I'm sent to this hand-picked psychiatrist who's an extreme right winger, who's he's been on social media, pro CIA, pro torture, and but he clears me of any, he finds me completely fit to fly, but he wants me to go get a full battery psychological testing first. So I leave
Wow.
his office, fly back to Florida. My kids are with the sitter. Wake up the next mornings, and there's a cop knocking on the door. I spend the next 6 days locked in a holding cell, uh, denied bond pending a psychological evaluation. Well, I already had two, and I passed with flying colors. And I ended up having, three more, including a full battery test that I excelled in. So again, this is a false arrest warrant by Joey Forgione, the son of the mob hitman who'd been
Yeah.
gunning for me over and over again and run around like a Keystone Cop cleaning up after Mike Noble. So they ended up forcing my kids to testify against me. They testified clearly and articulately that their grandfather had an arsenal of weapons, that they saw him murder a man, and that they took the body out in the woods, hung it from a tree, and burned it. And my son Gabe dropped the bombshell. They both testified to this. Gabe dropped the bombshell that there was somebody there helping Papa, and it was a man dressed up like a police officer, a bad guy dressed up like a police officer. Well, it wasn't just dressed up like a police officer. He wasn't a police
As a police
officer.
officer. Yeah.
So anyway, so they buried the kid's testimony, told the court reporter not to transcribe it, dropped the charges against me. So then next thing I know,
I mean, did you go back and try to sue for that? I don't know
no,
that it would do you any good, but it
no.
seems like you were treated unfairly.
Well, they were at least 9 plots to frame me. That was the only arrest. So anyway, next thing I know, I get this letter in my mail from the FAA saying that my application for a medical certificate dated the previous January had been denied because it disclosed alcohol abuse. Well, the application didn't disclose alcohol abuse because there was nothing to disclose, and I filled it out. I got a copy of it right here. So I found out later. I ordered my FAA records the same day, I guess it was the day before. This letter was sent out. This doctor had sent this letter asking the FAA to do this, and and a woman in Oklahoma City who's from a Freemason uh, Order of the Eastern Star military family had planted a fake DUI in my records. So,
Well, how did you get out of that? Did it end up costing you?
my career.
Yeah.
I've been grounded since 2012.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
well, they finally bullied me into going to this program, not knowing what it was.
Yeah.
Uh, and I find out after the fact that I was going to have to pay the very doctor who committed fraud. I had to pay him for committing fraud on me, use him as my sponsor. I wasn't giving a choice of any other sponsor, even though there was 40 other sponsors in this group. Everybody was handpicked. Uh, so a year later, so I get to go back to flying. This took like 6 months of being grounded, and I finally got to go back to flying.
Yeah.
So I had to go through all these random tests and AA meetings and relapse prevention meetings and all this stuff. I'd never been diagnosed with any substance abuse disorder, never had a DUI or anything. So, uh, as part of this program, every year I had to go get an annual psychological evaluation. So I go to this psychiatrist, another old ex-military dinosaur, psychiatrist, who does an evaluation. Of course, I do fine. And he finds that I don't meet criteria for alcoholism or alcohol abuse, yet recommends I stay in the program anyway, which that didn't make
That
sense.
doesn't make any sense.
Well, it gets even worse. Then the doctor that I went to begin with lobbied for him to amend his report, claiming I'd received treatment when I was in the military, which was a bold-faced lie. I've got all my records. So he amended his report. Fast forward another year. Now we've left Florida because of all the stalking and harassment and everything. We finally give up on Florida. We moved to Georgia for our safety. I had to find another program to go into up there to satisfy all their conditions to allow me to continue flying. So I go for an evaluation. They say, well, you don't meet the criteria to go into our program. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I have to go into your program to satisfy the FAA. So they let me do it. Well, the director of this program becomes suspicious after a while. So we asked Dr. Harper, that's the name of this doctor in Atlanta, he's deceased now, for my records. He gets a letter from another member of the Roswell Masonic Lodge, attorney Clifford Hardwick, saying, he doesn't have any records.
Come on.
So everything kind of seemed to coalesce at once to just push me over the edge, so to speak.
Yeah.
Now it's time for another annual evaluation. They try to force me to go back to the same doctor who amended his report the year before with false information. And I said, no, I'm getting an independent one. And they said, well, we're not going to accept that. Well, this guy was completely qualified to do evaluations for the FAA. Again, found me free of any criteria for any kind of treatment. They refused to accept his evaluation. So now this doctor is refusing to produce my records. They're trying to make me go get another evaluation for a guy who doctored his report the year before. And I said, enough is enough. I'm going to appeal this.
Yeah.
And spent that was 2012, spent the next year and a half. They put the screws to me. They ended up, the company blocked me from getting unemployment. I was granted unemployment, then it was rescinded. I appealed it. I was offered representation by Georgia Legal Services. Then they turned around and backpedaled and pulled out and refused to represent me. I went to a hearing. The hearing officer refused to let me present any evidence or witnesses. And my appeal of my medical certification. So I'm out of work, no unemployment, can't find a job. I'm appealing my medical certification. Well, they stalled, delay, and so forth. And before it was over, I was ganged up on by Stuart F. Dellery, who went on to become Joe Biden's chief counsel, Sally Quillian Yates, who went on to become the acting attorney general, 4 other top government lawyers in court who blocked my appeal. The same day they made their filing, I received a predated letter to coincide with the date of their filing from the IRS threatening to seize my assets. And then I had
it's so terrifying because obviously it goes all the way up through the government.
Yeah. And then I had this
I just keep wondering, why are they taking this much time on you?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing against you, but that just seems like a lot of effort and a lot of really high up people. And why?
No, it was all to discredit the kids, because if anybody believed what the kids saw, it's very problematic for lots of people.
Right, 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 right.
And so you have all these, these Knight Templar crazies, the mob, the John Birch Society, and there's peripheral people tied to the CIA. In the middle of all this, rewinding back to 2009 when the kids came back, Nobles told my son, and he showed it to him. He had this display case with pictures, with the newspaper clippings, and a rifle and a pistol. And he told my son that this was a hero's gun, and it was the gun that killed the president. And it was pictures of the Kennedy assassination.
Oh,
So,
well, so what he was saying was he was showing him the actual weapon
that he believed to be the weapon. Yes.
Yeah.
And with, the guy protecting him was a known associate as a Trafficante Jr. and all that. I think it's credible. I mean,
yeah.
The guy is the biggest liar I've ever known in my life. He's a pathological liar. But when he's telling the truth, he's bragging about the things he got away with. He's bragging about his crimes.
Right.
So, I think it's worth, for the people interested in that story, worth looking into. But I mean, the guy literally got away with murder. I mean, he had 2 eyewitnesses. There's no reason not to believe my kids.
Yeah. No, that's right.
And a whole family of kids.
I mean, at least believe enough to go look into it.
They refused to interview my kids. So there were crimes in 3 jurisdictions. The kid said it happened in the city of Niceville at their grandfather's house, which is in Okaloosa County, Florida, which has a sheriff's department.
Yeah.
And where they said, we found the site. That's what landed me in jail. We found the site where he burned the body, and it was exactly as the kids described. We found the burnt tree. Everything was precisely as the kids described. So they tried to frame me in 2 counties, tried to put me in jail in 2 counties for finding a burnt tree on federal property. So anyway, my point is, I wrote certified letters to the Walton County Sheriff's Department, because that's where the site in the woods was.
Yep.
To the Niceville Police Department, because that's where the crime allegedly occurred, and to the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department, because it was in their county, urging them to investigate, just examine the physical evidence, interview my kids. Instead they tried to put me in prison. My kids were never interviewed. They testified, to witnessing a murder. And
well, so kind of fast forward to today, are they still putting pressure on you, or are they now they're done with you and they've moved on, and is putting out this book going to bring that pressure back?
Probably.
Yeah.
I was obviously, I'm concerned about it. I mean, first and foremost, I'm remarried. I've got 2 little kids. Obviously, safety of my family is first and foremost. I don't think they're going to take a shot at me. It would look really bad if they did.
Yeah.
I'm really, my biggest concern is my career, because we were living off of food banks, food stamps, odd jobs, mowing lawns. I've got 10 years, 9 years in the military, and master's degree, and was an airline pilot. And here I'm mowing lawns and doing handyman.
Yeah, work, just trying to survive.
Just trying to survive. But I'm in the flying world now. I can't fly because I don't have a medical certificate, but I'm training pilots.
Yeah. Well, good for you for finding a way to get back.
And it's become a very good career for me. I'm finally, as of the last few years, making some comfortable living at it. So
yeah, well, good.
So
there's a little bit of a happy ending there.
Oh yeah,
but none of it should have happened.
But that's probably my biggest concern is someone wanting their revenge, trying to interfere with my career again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Because
they've been able to do it before.
What did that make you hesitate to write the book, or did that
Yes, but
yeah,
at the same time, all the victims, the injustice, not knowing how many other victims like that, how many other times did they employ these same kill the messenger tactics? These,
right.
because I've been able to break down the formulas they use. So you had at least 18 reports just involving my kids against this man in Florida. Nearly all of them were made by mandatory reporters. I'm talking about a psychiatrist, two from a medical doctor, two from a therapist, one from a psychologist, one from a school principal, one from a police officer. Well, what they did was they claimed I made all those reports. I'm just a crazy guy making stuff up. They funneled all the reports to the same three child protection services investigators who don't investigate the type of crimes that were being committed or alleged. That those investigations fall completely under the jurisdiction of law enforcement.
Right.
By law enforcement refused in writing to investigate. I have it in writing from the sheriff's department twice. We will not investigate. Because those have already been proven unfounded by the Florida Department of Children and Families under a supervisor who was a leader in the same church as him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're told to trust your law enforcement officers that they're going to do what's best, but part of that trust is that they're supposed to investigate this stuff, and when they find things that are unlawful or wrong, they're supposed to fix them with that. And it doesn't sound like they obviously either knew what was going on and covered it up, or just were getting pressure to ignore the situation and did.
And I don't want to smear all cops or
of course
the impression that I hate all cops. I did deal with some good ones.
Sure.
One was infuriated that he had a report seized from him by Joey Forgione, and he was not with the force very long after that.
Yeah, it's just
but when the leadership is able to funnel the case to the right person to make it go away, the good cop gets left out of it. So
yeah, what a story, and I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I guess I know we need to wrap up, but my biggest concern is how are your children doing now? They're probably grown now, right?
They're grown, doing great considering. I mean, in my opinion, I think they should never have to work again. They should have a hotshot lawyer come defend them and get them a multi-million-dollar, settlement.
Yeah,
but they're both working. The younger one is still living with me, but he works full time and pretty much, pays his own way. Now having said that, I don't want to get too much into their personal business, but there was a lot of struggles along the way. I mean, we're talking about 5 combined involuntary hospitalizations, a suicide attempt, dropping out of school, finally going back and finishing, so we fought some battles, but they're doing great now and have been for a while. The oldest, who's autistic, he's got his own place. I still have to help him pay his bills and take him to the doctor and stuff. He doesn't drive yet.
Yeah.
But he's dedicated worker, has been working the same job for several years now at a grocery store. And so
just as a parent, you did exactly what I think all of us would do. You tried to protect your kids, and you had no idea all of this was going to get uncovered. It seemed pretty straightforward probably when you started it. You had one bad actor, and that was the grandparent. And then all of this came in there. I don't even know how you've managed to keep your sanity through the whole thing.
Well, I mean, people will come out and attack my sanity. And having said that, I did admit myself to a hospital back in, 2014, maybe?
Yeah.
For PTSD, and I'm still go to counseling. I'm down to once every couple of weeks now. I take a mild anxiety medication, but I function just fine. But I have PTSD from it. But that's all I have. I've never.
Yeah, but that's awful.
I've never, suffered from schizophrenia or don't hear voices or people telling me things to do, or I'm dealing with very real people doing very real things and very crazy people trying to live with me crazy. So,
what's been the response for the book so far?
The handful of people I know that have finished it, I thought it was really good or shocked, in terms of sales numbers, I don't have any numbers yet. I know I got a little probably too optimistic when it jumped up to like number 60 something in the religious cults on Amazon, and from 800 something thousand up into the 100,000 range. But
Oh yeah.
I read an article about that says don't get too excited when you read that. That may not be that many books being sold.
Right.
So if you're not in the top 100, then so. But I want the book to sell. It's
Yeah,
called
we'll get the story out
Houses
there.
of the Holy.
I'm
The
kind
reason
of
I want to
wondering.
sell is not because of money. I want the story out.
That's
If
right.
I could give a copy of this to every person in the country for free, I'd do it.
Yeah.
You know, my
Well,
publisher has
I'm kind
money
of
invested in
wondering,
it.
will you get contacted by people that have similar experiences?
Well,
That's kind
that's
of
another hope. I hope that I can expose the tactics that were used, so people won't fall for those in the future if they're trying to protect their kids.
yeah.
And I'm hoping other people will come forward. I know, there's another case in here. The, this my ex-father's former pastor. He was accused of raping his wife and kids. They used the same tactics, smeared the wife, buried the evidence, destroyed evidence, and the guy's still, a pastor at a church, and he's a monster. And that's my opinion because I knew the family. I believe the wife and the children. I believe they were telling the truth. So,
Yeah, I'm sure.
you
Do
know,
you have any contact with your ex any longer?
uh, I suppose it's been 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. I think the kids have some sporadic contact. I've always tried to encourage them to maintain a relationship with her. It was a very tightrope because I was trying to let her be in their lives without a custody fight while keeping them safe at the same time.
Right.
And
Yeah, because you don't want you got to be careful not let her expose them back with the grandparents.
yeah, it was about a year ago, and it was about the time the word got out, probably that I was doing this book. She called up and trying to bribe my son who lives with me to moving back there with them. That's when I found I was shocked. I was really shocked because she had moved out to Colorado. They were
Yeah.
all scattered far apart, and so forth. I couldn't believe when I found out that they're all reconvened on a little family compound in Harrison, Arkansas, now after everything that happened. But
That doesn't surprise me. That because they just split apart because there was so much heat coming on them,
yeah,
and
well,
it died down, so they got back together.
yeah, a very wise psychologist told me, one time who saw her briefly and saw the kids for a while because they always return to the mosque.
Yeah, that's awful. It's just the whole thing's just terrible. Thank you, Mark, for sharing the story. It kind of makes a pit in my stomach. Just I can't imagine going through that. It doesn't seem possible, but it's happening. Yeah, I just appreciate you sharing. I hope we can at some point talk again and kind of get an update. See
I
what's
love
going
that.
on
Yeah.
with see how the book's going. If there were any repercussions, was there some positive that came out of it? We'll plan that because I'd like to see where this goes. What do you do if you get approached and someone wants to make this into a documentary or something?
I very strongly would like to see that happen again. Not because I want to be famous. My dirty laundry's in the book too. Not
Right.
I'll be drugged through the mud again. It's because I think it's an important story.
Yeah.
I very much like a documentary to be made of it. I did have a Hollywood producer who was interested. I sent him a ton of information after he looked it over. He said he had discussed it with his wife. They were both concerned with their safety, and he was going to pass. So
Yeah, that's so that right there is terrifying. And it shows we just need to whatever we got to do to start bringing these people into the light, so that we can fix some of the problems. I think this type of stuff if it really does go all the way up through our government, then that's probably a lot of the issues that we're having today. And we just don't understand what's actually going on behind the scenes.
Well, I don't want to get lumped in with QAnon crowd.
Sure.
I'm kind of the opposite of them right now at this point in my life. But um, the idea that there are powerful people who are able to use their positions, whether it's churches, secret societies, or whatever it is, to traffic in children is real.
Yeah.
There's cops, there's judges, there's politicians, and it's real. So
yeah, and I know, and it's terrifying with that, because most of us, we don't have any power really to go up against government or law enforcement. What it takes is large groups of people.
yeah,
That's why I'm hoping that when you get this fully out there, you start getting other stories coming out, and I think that's probably what's going to happen.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. I know it's not an easy subject to talk about, and you've lived it for now, well over a decade. You've been dealing with this.
It's not, but on that note, that's another reason I wrote the book.
Yeah.
And I told you I see a therapist every couple of weeks. This was part of this was therapy for me because I spent over a decade being silenced. You shut up or else. I've had somebody threaten to burn my house down, and been, death threats and whatever. And my kids, he threatened my kids, threatened to kidnap my kids, threatened to slit my son's throat and shoot me and various things. My brother-in-law threatened to have hired killers from Guyana come take me on a fishing trip and so forth. But the whole thing, for years was shut up or else.
Right.
So I had this horrible story that I wasn't supposed to talk about, and it was eating at me. So this is therapy for me. It's good for me to get out here and talk about it. It helps me, I think there's some psychological term for it or something. I don't know, but
well, I'm sure, and
basically
it probably feels
it.
good bringing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to instead of carrying that around,
Right.
let's do that. Before I let you go, Mark, where can we find the book? Do you have a website? Can we find you on social media? What if we want to know more?
I started a website, housesoftheholy.net.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of that was just to explain some of the backstories.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to eventually get some of the documents on there. I've provided tons of these documents to various law enforcement agencies. They vanished into a black hole. Oh, I'm sorry, the disk was blank. Sorry, I never received that. It's the same story, whether it's the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the FBI office in Gainesville, Georgia, or the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department. It's always the same story,
Yeah.
So I'd like to get it out to the public. With their permission, I've got the kids' videotape testimony regarding the murder on there. It's on YouTube, but there's a link to it on the website.
Yeah.
The book, Trine Day Press, Chris Millington, great guy, Milligan, sorry. You can buy it directly through him, but it's Amazon.com, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, any of the major book outlets you can get it. So you can. You can't really buy it directly from me. That is an option. I just didn't want to go there, but I've got the link on my website to Amazon and to Chris's.
Yeah, to purchase. Yeah. Well, I encourage everybody to get them a copy because I think it's important we educate ourselves on what's happening.
This could happen to any parent.
That's right.
Whose child is a victim of the wrong person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mark, best of luck. And yeah, we'll set this up, whenever 6 months, a year from now, and we'll touch base.
That would be great.
That'd be great. Okay, hold on one second. Author Mark Harris. I hope you enjoyed that. That was a difficult subject. We've had a few interviews that are a little outside of our norm, where we look at ourselves more as an entertainment podcast. But there's things happening out there that I think it's important that we shed some light on them, and we all have that responsibility to protect our next generations coming up. So I think it's really important that we have those conversations. I'm so happy that Mark came on the show. The book is Houses of the Holy. I encourage you to read those or read that one. I'm in the process of reading. I've just gotten started. It's very well written, and Mark lays it out very compellingly. A lot of evidence there. So draw your own conclusions, but I've drawn mine. And I'm just really getting started on the book. So check that out, Houses of the Holy by Mark Harris. If you're finding us for the first time, so happy that you're here. Would love to have your support. We've got 914 episodes out there and counting. You can find all of them on our website, meistercon.com, audio and video versions. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Please subscribe. It's free. Really helps us to continue to bring these terrific guests on the show. Appreciate you guys so much. Till next time. Bye, everybody.